The way that we're looking at leadership is not necessarily through the lens of business, or we can sort of invite you to think about any organization that is being led in any role that you're playing, which I think you can interpret as leading. But for that to start, I will just give a couple of intellectual provocations. We can't go into much depth, but we will sort of go maybe in the conversation into the pieces that resonate with you. I do want to share a couple of thoughts briefly before, and then share a little video, because Sheila yesterday, I think, reminded us that we need to use the arts in different ways to tell stories, maybe uplifting stories. So I asked my team to rush to finish a documentary that's about 10 minutes long, so I'll share that at the very end. You'll be the first audience to see it. It will go to film festivals, so we'll be under review for some time and not emerge, but it'd be great to have your feedback on that. But the bigger picture is really that reality proves possibility, and what we can do as human beings, maybe we can think about a new realism of who we are, because I think those are the three existential questions. Where do we come from? Who are we? Where are we going? We will try to center on what does it help for us to rethink who we are first, maybe through the lens of reality, what we know already. And with that, you all know the current situation. There are a lot of, like, some challenges, polycrisis, etc., is a term. But I just ask you to imagine. I think that was also a conversation yesterday. What if we imagine, got better at imagination? What if the business of business wasn't business, as it's commonly sort of assumed, but it was the noosphere? What does that even mean? I'll throw out that it could mean that we can create a world that works for everyone. But I ask you to imagine further. What if we can turn deserts into an oasis and grow healthier food there? What if we can turn desert into forest and then combat climate change? Well, what if there are companies that are doing just that, and the world actually knew about them? So reality proves possibility. Those companies actually exist. Many people don't report on them. Many people don't know about them. But CO2 can effectively be removed via what people call now regenerative agriculture. Climate change can be reversed if that is done at scale. Better health for people and planet are a result through a different type of business and leadership. I ask you to imagine another scenario. What if employees can actually be owners? Not modern slaves or cogs in the machine, but they can actually also successfully run companies. We asked a couple of Wall Street CEOs whether they think that's possible. They say no. But I ask you, what if it was? Because it is, again, a reality that proves possibility. In Spain, the number 10 company, one of the largest companies, called Mondragon, is a worker cooperative with more than 70,000 members. They're not employees, they're members. They run about 80 to 90 world-leading cooperative businesses. And people there feel empowered and dignified, and they see that space as a part of their human flourishing. Another imaginary story, but what if we can lower recidivism and create societal integration through business? And Grayston Bakery, in collaboration with Ben & Jerry's, has successfully done that over more than 40 years, reduced poverty and crime in Yonkers, New York, and people there feel empowered and dignified. So these are sometimes feel-good stories, but they actually speak to something bigger, as if we can imagine that that's possible for humanity, what stops us? What stops us? I think there is a bigger story that stops us, which is that we're fundamentally evil, we're fundamentally incompetent, or what you call is sort of the veneer theory of human nature. And you see that expressed in stories like The Lord of the Flies. You see it confirmed by some social psychological experiments like the Stanford prison experiment. You all probably heard of that. And it turns out that many of those stories aren't accurate. The Lord of the Flies is imagined, right? Much like Robinson Crusoe too. But there may be some reality to it, but it turns out that the reality is actually much different. And the reality of The Lord of the Flies, a story that basically is imagining people, again, landing on an island and then being really evil to each other to outcompete one another. Actually, we're much more cooperative than that. So the real story of the folks that actually landed on an island in the South Sea, they survived by collaborating, and they actually still like each other. The Stanford Prison Experiment, there's a recent National Geographic documentary out that says, it took Zimbardo quite a bit to get people to comply with being in that role. And it's not given that we're like turning into these evil folks, and it's just not true. But what if we actually took this seriously? I will say reality creates possibility. Rutger Bregman, that some of you probably know, has done a lot of the storytelling behind that too, because there's a lot of debunking that I think needs to go on, that we can create better imaginative stories that actually are already real. But we tend to sort of be stuck in like this is sort of a positive deviance, if anything. Now, I want to bring up Darwin because in many ways Darwin gets the credit to have coined this kind of understanding of us as being sort of like dog eat dog, especially in the business world. That's what people throw around. I just pulled a couple of quotes here, maybe read the first one, because there's nothing further from the truth there in a way that he says, the following proposition seems to be in a high degree probable, namely that any animal whatever endowed with well marked social instincts would inevitably acquire a moral sense or a conscience as soon as its intellectual powers had become as well or nearly as well developed as in man. This is part of the Descent of Man, another volume that he's writing, but he's very clear that our social nature, based on this emotionality that we've been discussing, is actually leading us to collaborate effectively in those that are able to collaborate, outcompete, and outsurvive the group that isn't. And so we have become fundamentally collaborative, but we don't necessarily believe it. One of the most powerful narratives that is culturally endorsed is that of Scrooge McDuck, is that of Homo economicus, which basically assumes we're only in it for ourselves. The evidence showcases that, yes, there are these people. They're called psychopaths, but they're like the negatively deviant people, and there may be 1% to 4% of it. But we seem to have designed organizations, especially businesses, to cater to that type. Whereas for the 96 or 99%, we fail. And that's why you probably don't have to be surprised that most of our people in organizations are depressed. But what if we were acting like the result of 4 billion years of evolutional success? And we actually got back to who we are and what made us survive. Then I think a new realism may kick in. At this point, we're sort of celebrating the superheroes on one end, Marvel characters, those are the blockbusters. But in reality, many other people are sort of like checking out. And I think the noosphere can give us a sense of like, yeah, we are not the superhero, and we don't have to check out necessarily. We have agency, and we can co-create. But we can't do it by ourselves. We actually need to intentionally create the conditions under which we can collaborate effectively. It does require a certain intentionality, direction, and meaning, which I think is part of the Noospheric conversation. Are we organizing for survival? No. No, we're sort of like creating business models that are benefiting from desperation, right? I'm saying that there are different ways of looking at what leadership options are in any organizations, but the typical one that we're endorsing right now is the one of the triangular sandwich, which basically says you're a good leader if you maximize something, right? It could be GDP, it could be profit, it could be fame, it could be something, market share. So you choose your maximization function or the dependent variable, and then you go after that, and you're a great leader when you do that. When in fact, I think the evolutionary insights show us, no, we're actually designed to balance, and good leaders balance. And so just in terms of the contrarian example, you may be familiar with Kate Raworth's donut economics. We use the bagel to distinguish that, okay, we actually, as a species, to survive well and flourish, we need to fulfill the dignity minimum. And that's where we actually start having energy. Human energy actually becomes activated. And then we have to respect, just as a physical fact, that there are planetary boundaries. And so within that, we have a safe and just operating zone for humanity in which we can all flourish. Are we taking this up as a leadership option? It's a possibility, right? And I'll show you a couple of examples of businesses that are already doing it. Many of you don't know because they're not publicly listed oftentimes, and they don't do scandal very well because only those businesses seem to do scandalous stuff, seem to be on the front page of some news. There are some leaders behind that. You may know Paul Pullman. I'm not really sure that he endorses the Noospheric as such, but he certainly behaved in a more conscious way that would allow some of that to develop. So what if we can imagine human collaboration to have the intentionality to create a world that works for everyone, with everyone a co-creator in business and beyond? We call this humanistic leadership, and it turns out it is actually good for you, health-wise and wealth-wise and well-being-wise. So with that, I actually just want to pause and show you an example of an organization that has been doing this for 50 years almost. It's in Egypt, so I thought it may be particularly relevant, and it's working in the domain of agriculture, but it's just sort of a multi-sector business. It's called Sechem.
Deep inside of me, there was a living image. In the middle of a desert, I see myself scooping up water from a source. Carefully, I plant trees, herbs, flowers, and drench their roots with the precious moisture. The cool water attracts people and animals who quench and refresh themselves. The trees offer shade. The land turns green.
It all started in 1975. It was just after the war. This peace movement coming and some hope for a peaceful future. And this was the reason that my father then decided to take the family to Egypt to show them his home country. Coming to Egypt from Austria, where we were living in a small village where we have 8 months per year snow, and then going into the desert, meeting the camels, seeing the pyramids, going to the temples, visiting these people living in clay houses and without electricity and without water and wastewater and so on, was just impressive for all of us. And I'm speaking about my sister, my mother, and myself. Is an interesting example of this issue of inner coal and outer coal. He felt strongly the outer coal of Egypt when he came here in 1975. Something was needed, and he was ready with courage to do things which are really crazy. And at the same time, he had his inner coal, and as an inner coal, he had this continuous search for truth, for science, for understanding what we miss out if we reduce our world to the material part of it.
You know, it was desert. It was really some little trees. And then he told me, here we will make a school, and here we will make a cheese factory, and I will build you a palace over there. And of course, the palace I didn't believe, but all other things, I was quite sure this will happen.
Sechem can be a model of what humanity can do in a very figurative and literal way, in a sense of turning a desert into an oasis.
If you want to bring back life into the desert, it needs water. There's no life without water. And if you're going into the desert in this place here, for example, in the mother farm of Sechem, where they started in the very beginning, it is a little bit in the outskirts of the Nile Delta, which is very rich in water from the Nile. The water what we are using here is mainly through a well which we are digging till 20 meters. but it is basically coming from the underlying water of the Nile. So the underground water is fed by the Nile.
So what's powerful about this example is that you literally turn desert into a paradise of sorts that you oftentimes don't know is possible.
In a certain way, sometimes we have to dream with something and then a little bit to achieve little bit objectives over the years to achieve the long way dream.
So the magic works.
Sechem means vitality of the sun. Look, most of the planet is desert, and with climate change, we're going to see more and more land becoming dry and barren. With Ibrahim's strong belief, along with the collective vision of others, 40 years later, this area has been completely transformed with healthy, flourishing soil. Healthy soil equals plants. Plants that are now responsible for several highly profitable companies that produce medicine, food, and clothing. Companies that are leaders not only in Egypt, but worldwide. And how did they do it? Take excess carbon out of the air and put it in the soil. That's it, done. This didn't just regenerate soil, it regenerated a community.
So I come here, of course I chit-chat a bit with my colleagues in the morning, and then we start the morning circle, where we all come together in one circle, all the employees. We come around one tree and we look at each other, see who's here, see who's not.
I think this circle has magic. For the Sechem community, it's a very, very important ritual because it's really what shows this piece of social art in action. When people from very different walks of life are just joining in this circle, and each one of them feels at home. For very, very different purposes, very, very different reasons, they all feel at home. Or it's their circle of interest because they are making good business. It doesn't really matter where you stand, it must work for everyone.
I wanted to be a dentist. Anything in the school, activities, playing, drawing. Learning drawing in this, I can draw anything. I learned it from Miss Hagar.
When I came to Sechem school, I found the life in the school, not the school in the life. Everything is alive. The classroom is alive, beautiful. Everything around us is beautiful. There is no fences. There is no limited in knowledge or to express about ourselves as a teachers or as a students. So I think all the students here, they felt they are in their home.
Women should be empowered, should be well educated, should be in a good health situation and well-being. This is fact in our beliefs, and it's also in the Egyptian constitutions. It's written, but who is applying? This is the questions.
Lucky are the girls which came to Sechem, which worked with my mother because they had a good salary, a good income, could marry, could have an independent life. I mean, she was from the very beginning connected to building up this Sechem community from scratch, from nothing. And I think it's really she who made it possible also that girls, which 47 years ago were not leaving their homes easily, going to factories or farms or communities to work, could come. It's, as I said, for her, the wealth of this experience are the connections, the people. My father, being more an intellectual guy, a researcher, you see all the books. He needed operas, he needed cultural events, he needed nourishment of another kind for his soul.
أنا حبيت سيكم جدا جدا أنا وارتحت نفسيا وتعلمت حاجات كتير في سيكم وأولادي هنا تعلموا جبتهم من الحضانة لأن ما خلصوا الكلية هم في سيكم هنا وحبينا والدكتور إبراهيم جدا وكان بيحبنا جدا وبيمشي معانا مش صاحب عمل، كان اب لينا، فكنا بنمشي ماشيين معاه بكل شغل بإخلاص وكل جد.
My dad would have been able to go out now of this office, go to the right side, meet a gardener, and engage in a discussion about his daughter. And then in the evening send him something which he was mentioning, she needs a book or she needs a pen or something, and then sending it. And he was able to do this for the thousands of people of Sikkim.
هنا أكتر حاجة بنحبها هنا وتعلمناها المواعيد والنظام.
أنا لما جيت هنا طبعا أعجبت جدا بالمكان والمنظر. أنا لما باجي هنا مش بحس إن أنا جاي أشتغل في مستشفى، أنا جاي رحلة.
Everything that we're doing here and what we're working on is for a cause that it cares about everything. So it cares about the people, make sure that they're treated fairly, and then the environment is regenerating itself.
I have friends and I play with friends. The last school I don't friends.
Every day I'm waking up and I'm quite motivated to see what's coming next, because you never know what's coming next. It's challenging you, it's bringing you to the edge. It brings you emotionally to the edge also. Lots of chances to learn.
So they really care for the people and not only giving them the feeling that they are seen, no, being seen. This is what they honored most in their relationship with him.
I never forget the advice of Dr. Ibrahim. We are here to serve the students, to shape their minds. So let's imagine that we are shaping their minds with their future, cool and ambitious and passionate, and we mingle both together to have a real change for the future and for the current state as well.
Can we transform this energy beyond Sikkim, right? How can we enable other organizations, other farmers, other companies to apply this holistic concept of Sikkim in their organizations, in their operations?
So, my dear friend, I can only share with you my real life experience. And this is that as soon as you get confident that the future of the world lies in your hands and that you can impact the future, and that what you do today will create the future of tomorrow, that you take this responsibility on, that you do never get desperate on the future of the world, because this would mean that you get desperate on yourself. And miracles like the miracle of Sikkim are possible when you have the ability to create a vision for where you want to go, and even more important, that you get your inner courage together and move on the steps, do the right things, and by doing the right things, you will see it makes you happy and grateful every day.
So I think you see some of the themes that were done philosophically applied in that live or lived experience.